Good morning and welcome to Fox 29's News Now on this Tuesday morning. We're going to get started with some local news out of Delaware, where a Newcastle man is facing charges for impersonating a police officer. Police say he may have been playing the part for a while. Fox 29's Lauren Johnson filed this report.
Hey, good morning. So detectives are wondering how many people came in contact with him while he was impersonating a public official. They don't know that just yet, but they do know they have the right guy. They arrested him. Take a look at the mugshot. That's 25-year-old Shane Wendell, and see if he looks familiar to you. Arrested and booked on Friday night. Mill Creek Fire Department responded to the latest in a series of false alarm calls here at the Crossing Apartments. Apartment security officers tipped off police when they noticed him at the scene wearing a U.S. Marshal's patch he bought online. He also had on a ballistics vest and a gun holster. And that's not it. His car, a 2010 Chevy Cobalt, was outfitted to look like a police cruiser with red and blue police light bars in both the front and the back.
You just don't know what this world is going to come to if anybody can do that. If they can walk into your house, act like a cop, come up to your house. And then the sad thing is that what if he got the calls that cops came to somebody's house and harassed them, robbed them, took all their stuff? Like, you just never know. He could have just did anything to us because he's a cop. He's acting like a cop.
He should be locked up. I mean, that's our tax dollars that he's just blowing and causing them to spend more tax dollars to chase his stupid.
What was his intentions? Like, what was his motive? Like, what is he trying to get out of it? That's what we're trying to figure out.
A source close to the investigation tells Fox 29 Wendell told many people that he was a state police detective. The local fire department has his picture up inside, and they list him as armed and dangerous. If you recognize him or you've had any encounter with him since he's been released on his own recognizance, you're asked to call police.
And in political news this morning, the White House is threatening to veto a $4.5 billion House bill aimed at improving the treatment of migrant families detained after crossing the U.S. southern border, saying the measure would hamstring the administration's border security efforts and raising fresh questions about the legislation's fate. Fox News correspondent Doug Luzader has more this morning from Washington.
With an extended 4th of July vacation looming, Congress has almost no time left to get this done.
Mexico deploying thousands of troops to its southern border to crack down on northbound immigrants, but the U.S. border is stuck in limbo.
We're full and we're running out of money. We need this money to take care of these kids.
Congress at a standstill with critical border money about to run out, and President Trump threatening to begin deportations early next month unless there's a deal.
When I saw that the president was going to have these raids, I mean, it was so appalling. It's outside the circle of civilized human behavior.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi railing against the president, but she's having a tough time keeping her fellow Democrats in line to get a deal done. Many seizing on reports of children being held in poor conditions near the border.
This can't be America. This can't be what we're about.
This is a false narrative.
The acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, meantime, says his department is trying to target immigrants who have already been ordered to leave.
We're not ripping up families. We're enforcing the rule of law, maintaining the integrity of the system. It's unconscionable what's being said. It's just not true.
And as Democrats seek new protections for illegal immigrants as part of a funding package, the White House is threatening a veto. And early this morning, one Republican who supports stronger borders said count him out.
If we can't deport people who have already had their cases adjudicated and already have orders to be removed, who in the world can you deport?
And throw in election year politics and the rush to get out of town for the holiday, and Congress has a steep hill to climb. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
And in business news this morning, a fresh take on McDonald's burgers, and the United States is moving the manufacturing of next-gen 5G technology. Fox's Joy Piazza has more in today's Morning Business Outlook.
President Trump imposes hard-hitting sanctions against Iran, leaving the stocks with mixed results. The Dow Jones was up while the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq closed on a low. Growing concerns over new 5G technology has the U.S. considering another direction, making the next round of equipment outside of China. The decision stemming from global cybersecurity concerns and could also affect future U.S.-China trade talks. Up next, the U.S. telecommunications supply chain will undergo a 150-day review to find out if the 5G equipment can be better elsewhere. And McDonald's making changes to beef up its profits. The fast food giant announced in the year since it started using fresh beef instead of frozen, sales of its signature burger have soared an average of 30%. McDonald's says the burgers are hotter and juicier with the fresh beef. That's business, and for more, log on to foxbusiness.com. In New York, I'm Joy Piazza.
And moving on to your Fox 29 Weather Authority. The Philadelphia area is slated for some morning rain and afternoon sun Tuesday amid rising temperatures. Tuesday will reach a high of around 88 degrees, and temperatures are forecasted to stay in the low 90s for the majority of the week, giving us our first heat wave of the summer. Conditions are expected to remain dry and humid. Here we have a look at temperatures in our region. 68 degrees up in Mount Pocono, 79 degrees over in Lancaster, and it's already reached 80 degrees this early in Philadelphia, and just slightly cooler down the shore in Atlantic City and Wildwood, 75 and 78 respectively. And looking ahead to your 7-day forecast, again, a mix of cloud and sun today, but hopefully that rain should be out of there before the Phillies take on the Mets again tonight following their win last night. And the hot and sunny conditions continue Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday before precipitation potentially returns to the forecast with some late thunderstorms this Saturday. And don't forget to download the latest version of the Fox 29 Weather Authority app to have the latest forecast right at your fingertips. And back to local news this morning. A man is dead after a shooting in South Philadelphia. It happened around 11:30 last night on the 2100 block of Bailey Terrace. Police were investigating another shooting only a half block away when they heard shots fired down the street. They found a 24-year-old man shot once in the abdomen and took him to the hospital, where he later died. Just before that, one person was killed and multiple others injured in a shooting on the same block. Police say there was a domestic dispute inside a home on the 2100 block of Bailey Terrace just before 10 last night. The fight spilled onto the street and several people were stabbed. They believe one of the stabbing victims, a 26-year-old man, pulled out a gun and started shooting. Those shots killed a 42-year-old woman and injured a man and woman who were in their 50s. The suspected shooter has been arrested. And in Philadelphia, another scandal has hit its police department. What was supposed to be a simple open book exam led to 10 police recruits resigning from the academy. The recruits apparently got their hands on the answers to a written exam before taking the test. The cheating came to light after another recruit reported it. A police spokesperson says if the 10 recruits hadn't quit, they would have been rejected during probation. They also say no commanding officers have been disciplined in relation to the cheating incident. And some good news in Camden County, a nice little update to a story we brought you last week. A Good Samaritan is lending a big helping hand to a local Little League in the wake of a large-scale robbery. We first reported to you on Friday how suspected thieves broke into the North Camden Little League snack stand and wiped it clean. Burglars got away with a grill, refrigerators, a freezer, food, and much more. It set the entire Little League back right before the start of their season. But after our story aired on Friday, an anonymous Good Samaritan came forward and donated $15,000 to replace the stolen equipment. And in other news this morning, developing now, Chicago police have released nearly 70 hours of footage from their investigation into the alleged attack on Jussie Smollett. One portion shows body cam footage from the night of the alleged attack. Police arrived at the actor's Chicago apartment after responding to a 911 call. Police were led in by Smollett's creative director, Frank Gatson. Video shows the Empire actor with his face blurred, wearing a white robe around his neck, and you can hear him interacting with police.
You want to take it off or anything? Yeah, I do. I just want to see. There's a bleach on me. Bleach on me. I don't want to be filmed.
The recording stopped after the actor said he did not want to be filmed. It was Gatson who alerted him that police were filming the encounter. Last week, a judge appointed a special prosecutor to determine if new charges should be brought against the actor.
If you want, if it's in his house.
And this morning on Good Day Philadelphia, attorney Shaka Johnson stopped by to discuss the case.
Let's talk about this a little bit here. Chicago police have released nearly 70 hours of footage from their investigation into the alleged attack on Jussie Smollett. I guess the media asked for this to be released.
They did, and finally, it's been put out there. So one portion shows body cam footage of when, this is after the 911 call, when police arrived at the scene and they went into Jussie Smollett's Chicago apartment. They were led in by Smollett's creative director, Frank Gatson. Video shows Jussie with his face blurred, but you can see the white rope, the noose, around his neck. And you can even hear him interacting with police. Here it is.
You want to take it off or anything? Yeah, I do. I just want to see. There's a bleach on me. Bleach on me. I don't want to be filmed.
And it's a moment that a lot of people are talking about because they said he still had the noose around his neck, and he said, yeah, I have it because I want you guys to see it. The recording stopped after the actor said he didn't want to be filmed. It was Gatson who alerted him to the fact that police had their body cameras on, so therefore they were filming the encounter. Last week, a judge appointed a special prosecutor to determine if new charges should be brought against Smollett.
So, defense attorney Shaka Johnson is here. He was also a police officer for 10 years during his career.
Correct.
If the cops come into my apartment, can I tell them to stop taping?
Well, if they're there to, for the purpose that they were there in Mr. Smollett's apartment, well, you can, because he was a victim of a crime.
Oh, I got you.
He was a victim of a crime. But, you know, in this particular case, the book was better than the movie, right? Because when we heard about these allegations, when we heard about them, I think all of us in our minds started to recreate the scenario in our mind. When you get a chance to see what the Chicago police have released, this is an abysmal betrayal, quite frankly, I think, of someone who has been victimized in the way Mr. Smollett alleges he's been victimized. That thin piece of string or yarn or whatever it is around his neck, the way they're behaving, it all seems very questionable, quite frankly. And now you know why Judge Tooman in Chicago has assigned a special prosecutor, because he's called it an unprecedented amount of irregularities in the way the case was handled.
But the interesting thing here is they've all seen this video. It's just the public that's getting to see it for the first time.
And that's the thing.
So they have known. So what could be different?
All the key players have already seen this.
Right.
Members of the prosecution, the defense, the state's attorney's office, the police, the FBI, they've all seen this. We, members of the media, are just now getting, to see this.
Right.
So the question is, was it handled properly? So sometimes people are saying a special prosecutor is being inserted into the mix in order to find out if there are new charges against Mr. Smollett. That's not the case. There's a special prosecutor being assigned to the case to find out if the state's attorney's office handled this properly.
Because they dropped the
charges.
charges.
Are being investigated. The state's attorney's office, Kim Fox, and everyone in her employ who touched this case.
They're investigating the investigators.
That is correct.
Because the charges ended up being dropped, right?
And the way they were dropped. And the way they were dropped. And the language that Judge Tooman used was unprecedented irregularities. And then he says we have to restore the public's faith and confidence in the system. And the way the case was handled, some would say botched, needs to be reviewed.
So this is your opinion.
Sure.
After looking at the footage.
Yes.
Why do you come to those conclusions?
Well, because I have a legal hat, and then I have just an everyday man hat, you know. And with my everyday man hat, and as I look at the video, I don't know how a person would behave when they're under such, you know, that sort of stress.
I don't know.
Because there's no common reaction, right?
No. Right.
But in my inner mind's eye, when I look at that video, it just doesn't seem to me, in my humble opinion, that for the egregious nature of what happened to him, you know, the allegations that he put forth, it just didn't seem that, especially when he found out the cameras were rolling, there seemed to be like a little bit, wait a minute, can you turn those off?
But I took that to mean, and we're all just speculating here, but
Sure.
because he is some form of a celebrity, and they were in his apartment, that maybe he felt like, I don't want people to know where I am or where I live, and to have that out there. But yeah, and the fact that we can't see his face, we don't know, you know, if he was crying or if his face was contorted or what was going on.
And what is the point of? We all know what he looks like. Why do we blur his
Point of
face?
the I have no idea. I don't know what blur his face. Like,
Is that because maybe they blurred it originally because they thought he was a victim in the beginning?
Well,
that
you
could
can't
be.
unblur once you blur. I don't know.
Well, you can. Well, you can because the police cams don't blur. Obviously, they record it in raw time and raw footage. So,
but to me, it just seems like now that we've seen this video, nothing has changed really. It's just now we're just getting to have an inside look.
It's just titillating.
And to be clear, when you can't get the man, you start to investigate the people who couldn't get the man. You know, and that is clearly what's going on here.
But I know we have to wrap this up. But even if you investigate the people who couldn't get the man, it's still the man. Nothing's going to happen to him, right? Nothing's going to change. He's forever going to be able to be, hey, I'm fine.
Well, maybe not. But that special prosecutor, that is not the focus of her job at the moment.
Okay.
The focus of her job at the moment is to make sure the case wasn't mishandled. If, in fact, she determines the case was mishandled, she could make a recommendation that the case be reopened.
Open it again.
Correct.
And then it's another can of worms,
and
we're
then
going
we're back
in.
here again.
Okay.
Wow. Shaka, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And more on Good Day this morning. U.S. women will soon have another drug option designed to boost low sex drive, a shot they can give themselves in the thigh or abdomen that raises sexual interest for several hours. Dr. Mike joined Good Day this morning to discuss.
Well, the FDA has just approved a second drug now for women with low libido. Well, we want to know how this works.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Dr. Mike, let us know. Fill us in.
First of all, what is low libido? Just remind everybody.
Well, this is in premenopausal women that do not have any medical or psychiatric causes for decreased libido. It's unexplained. It's very complicated, and researchers are really trying to find a drug that works. Now, there is something called Vyleesi, which just came out. Vyleesi. And it stimulates the brain and increases, supposedly, we don't really know how it works, but increases the brain's and sexual desire. Now, in the studies, and this is going to be coming out very shortly, bottom line is 25% of an increase compared to the placebo of 17%.
Oh.
Now, there's some side effects.
Oh, no.
Oh, here we go. Like what?
Intense vomiting or something.
Well,
so now you're all ready to go. And then,
well, it's injectable. That's number one. You inject it before.
Where?
Okay, well, we get over
thigh, stomach.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Men have one of
I'm
those.
saying.
Men have a drug, a Caverjet, where you inject it.
I don't know this. What are you talking about? What's a Caverjet?
Well, that's for erectile dysfunction. That's
Oh.
another story. But let's
that's not
get back
the same
to this.
thing.
No, but it
That
has
doesn't have
the
to do with
same
your desire. It's
dysfunction. Will you let me talk?
Okay,
please?
sorry.
So basically, what happens with this drug is that you take it injectably, all right, or you give an injection about 45 minutes before your desired activity.
You got a
Now,
plan.
the problem is that researchers have found about 40% of women will develop nausea.
I knew it.
Vomiting.
All right.
I knew it.
So 40%. About 1% develop dark colorations of the skin, and you can only do it once in a 24-hour period, so you can't
That's about all I
do
can
it
do anyway.
twice. And you can only do it about 8 times in a month.
Well, that's,
So-
that's way too many times.
Well,
What happens if
yeah.
you do it more?
Well, they don't recommend that.
Okay.
So I
Is
wouldn't
there
do
is
it.
there a rule, like if it's something, if you feel a certain kind of way for longer than however many hours, you have to go to like seek medical
No,
attention.
it's not like
Stop laughing.
priapism. You're speaking of priapism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's where you have a prolonged erection that
Yes.
doesn't go away.
That lasts for 4 hours or more. They always say, call a doctor. Are you kidding me? If that happens to me, I'm calling everybody I know.
All right.
And then,
We'll make
so
a-
it's an
make a
injection,
film.
or is there also a pill form, or it's definitely just, you can only inject it?
This one's just injectable.
Okay.
Now, this isn't the only one. The other one, Ally, I think, came out
Ally
a year ago.
or Ally?
Not Ally. That's for weight loss.
Okay.
He
Ally.
says, I know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Not Ally. Addie.
Addie, okay.
Addie. The
Addie.
problem with that
Addie,
one
Addie,
is
Addie.
that you can't drink alcohol with it.
Oh, well.
So I'm telling you, if I could, I would find this, I would come up with the drug, and I would be having this show in Acapulco.
You mean a drug where you could
Where he
and not have
works.
the same side effects, and you can
No side effects, works great.
You'd be a billionaire.
I would be.
Instead of taking it and then you turn into a vomiting giraffe.
That's basically what it sounds like.
Yeah,
But
big-
would it be worth it? Maybe that's worth it for some people.
Yeah.
You never know.
Well, hey, it may work for some. Who knows? We'll have to try.
When can we get it?
Soon.
Okay.
Like really soon, or like
Well,
years from
they
now?
haven't put a price on it yet.
Okay, but within the next year or two?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's FDA approved.
All right.
We're good to go, ready
Thank
for
you.
launch.
So to speak.
And we are going to turn you over to Washington now, where the Senate is holding a hearing on internet platform algorithms. Stay with us.
Research institute dedicated to understanding the social implications of artificial intelligence. Part of my role includes researching the increasing reliance on AI and algorithmic systems and crafting policy and legal recommendations to address and mitigate the problems we identify in our research. The use of data-driven technologies like recommendation algorithms, predictive analytics, and inferential systems are rapidly expanding in both consumer and government sectors. They determine where our children go to school, whether someone will receive Medicaid benefits, who is sent to jail before trial, which news articles we see, and which job seekers are offered an interview. Thus, they have a profound impact on our lives and require immediate attention and action by Congress. Though these technologies affect every American, they are primarily developed and deployed by a few powerful companies and therefore shaped by these companies' incentives, values, and interests. These companies have demonstrated limited insight into whether their products will harm consumers and even less experience in mitigating those harms. So while most technology companies promise that their products will lead to broad societal benefits, there's little evidence to support these claims, and in fact, mounting evidence points to the contrary. For example, IBM's Watson supercomputer was designed to improve patient outcomes, but recently internal IBM documents showed it actually provided unsafe and erroneous cancer treatment recommendations. This is just one of numerous examples that have come to light in the last year showing the difference between the marketing companies used to sell these technologies and the stark reality of how these technologies ultimately perform. While many powerful industries pose potential harms to consumers with new products, the industry producing algorithmic and AI systems pose three particular risks that current laws and incentive structures fail to adequately address. The first risk is that AI systems are based on compiled data that reflect historical and existing social and economic conditions. This data is neither neutral or objective. Thus, AI systems tend to reflect and amplify cultural biases, value judgments, and social inequities. Meanwhile, most existing laws and regulations struggle to account for or adequately remedy these disparate outcomes, as they tend to focus on individual acts of discrimination and less on systemic bias or bias encoded in the development process. The second risk is that many AI systems and internet platforms are optimization systems that prioritize technology companies' monetary interests and results in products being designed to keep users engaged while often ignoring social costs like how the product may affect non-users, environments, and markets. A non-AI example of this logic and model is a slot machine, while a recent AI-based example is the navigation system Waze, which was subject to public scrutiny following many incidents across the U.S. where the application redirected highway traffic through residential neighborhoods unequipped for the influx of vehicles, which increased accidents and risk to pedestrians. The third risk is that most of these technologies are black boxes, both technologically and legally. Technologically, they're black boxes because most of the internal workings are hidden away inside the companies. Legally, technology companies obstruct accountability efforts through claims of proprietary or trade secret legal protections, even though there is no evidence that legitimate inspection, auditing, or oversight poses any competitive risk. Controversies regarding emerging technologies are becoming increasingly common and show the harm caused by technologies optimized for narrow goals like engagement, speed, and profit at the expense of social and ethical considerations like safety and accuracy. We are at a critical moment where Congress is in a position to act on some of the most pressing issues, and by doing so, paving the way for a technological future that is safe, accountable, and equitable. With these concerns in mind, I offer the following recommendations, which are detailed in my written statement. Require technology companies to waive trade secrecy and other legal claims that hinder oversight and accountability mechanisms. Require public disclosure of technologies that are involved in any decision about consumers by name and vendor. Empower consumer protection agencies to apply truth in advertising laws. Revive the Congressional Office of Technology Assessment to perform pre-market review and post-market monitoring of technologies. Enhance whistleblower protections for technology company employees that identify unethical and unlawful uses of AI or algorithms. Require any transparency or accountability mechanisms to include a detailed reporting of the full stack supply chain, and require companies to perform and publish algorithmic impact assessments prior to public use of products and services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Well, let me start, Mr. Harris, with you. As we go about crafting consumer data privacy legislation in this committee, we know that internet platforms like Google and Facebook have vast quantities of data about each user. What can these companies predict about users based on that data?
Thank you for the question. So I think there's an important connection to make between privacy and persuasion that I think often isn't linked, so maybe it's helpful to link that. With Cambridge Analytica, that was an event in which, based on your Facebook likes, based on 150 of your Facebook likes, I could predict your political personality, and then I could do things with that. The reason I described in my opening statement that this is about an increasing asymmetry of power is that without any of your data, I can predict increasing features about you using AI. There's a paper recently that with 80% accuracy, I can predict your same big 5 personality traits that Cambridge Analytica got from you without any of your data. All I have to do is look at your mouse movements and click patterns. So in other words, it's the end of the poker face. Your behavior is your signature, and we can know your political personality. Based on tweet text alone, we can actually know your political affiliation with about 80% accuracy. Computers can calculate probably that you're homosexual before you might know that you're homosexual. They can predict with 95% accuracy that you're going to quit your job according to an IBM study. They can predict that you're pregnant. They can predict your microexpressions on your face better than a human being can. Microexpressions are your soft reactions to things that are not very visible but are invisibly visible. Computers can predict that. As you keep going and you realize that you can start to deep fake things, you can actually generate a new synthetic piece of media, a new synthetic face or synthetic message that is perfectly tuned to these characteristics. And the reason why I opened the statement by saying we have to recognize that what this is all about is a growing asymmetry of power between technology and the limits of the human mind. My favorite sociobiologist, E.O. Wilson, said the fundamental problem of humanity is that we have Paleolithic ancient emotions, we have medieval institutions, and we have godlike technology. So we're chimpanzees with nukes, and our Paleolithic brains are limited against the increasing exponential power of technology at predicting things about us. The reason why it's so important to migrate this relationship from being extractive to get things out of you to being a fiduciary is you can't have asymmetric power that is specifically designed to extract things from you. Just like you can't have, again, lawyers or doctors whose entire business model is to take everything they learned and sell it to someone else. Except in this case, the level of things that we can predict about you is far greater than actually each of those fields combined when you actually add up all the data that assembles a more and more accurate voodoo doll of each of us. And there's 2 billion voodoo dolls, by the way. There's one out of every 4 people on Earth with YouTube's and Facebook are more than 2 billion people.
Ms. Stanfield, in your prepared testimony, you note that companies like Google have a responsibility to ensure that products support users' digital well-being. Does Google use persuasive technology, meaning technology that is designed to change people's attitudes and behaviors? And if so, how do you use it? And do you believe that persuasive technology supports a user's digital well-being?
Thank you, Senator. No, we do not use persuasive technology at Google. In fact, our foremost principles are built around transparency, security, and control of our users' data. Those are the principles through which we design products at Google.
Dr. Wolfram, in your prepared testimony, you write that it's possible to expect, impossible, I should say, to expect any useful form of general explainability for automated content selection systems. If this is the case, what should policymakers require or expect of Internet platforms with respect to algorithm explanation or transparency?
I don't think that explaining how algorithms work is a great direction. I mean, the basic issue is if the algorithm is doing something really interesting, then you're not going to be able to explain it, because if you could explain it, it would be like saying you can jump ahead and say what it's going to do without letting it just do what it's going to do. So it's kind of a scientific issue that if you're going to have something that is explainable, then it isn't getting to use the sort of full power of computation to do what it does. So my own view, which is sort of disappointing for me as a technologist, is that you actually have to put humans in the loop. And in a sense, the thing to understand about AI is we can automate many things about how things get done. What we don't get to automate is the goals of what we want to do. The goals of what we want to do are not something that is sort of definable as an automatic thing. The goals of what we want to do is something that humans have to come up with. And so I think the most promising direction is to think about breaking kind of the AI pipeline and figuring out where you can put into that AI pipeline the right level of kind of human input. My own feeling is the most promising possibility is to kind of insert, to leave the great value that's been produced by the current automated content selection companies in ingesting large amounts of data, being able to monetize large amounts of content, et cetera, but to insert a way for users to be able to choose who they trust about what finally shows up in their news feed or in their search results or whatever else. And I think that there are technological ways to make that kind of insertion that will actually, if anything, add to the richness of potential experience for users and possibly even the financial returns for the market.
And very quickly, Ms. Richardson, what are your views about whether algorithm explanation or algorithm transparency are appropriate policy responses, and kind of response to Dr. Wolfram's?
I think they're a good interim step in that transparency is almost necessary to understand what these technologies are doing and to assess the benefits and risk. But I don't think transparency or even explainability is an end goal, because I still think you're going to need some level of legal regulation to impose liability so bad or negligent actors act in a proper manner, but also to incentivize companies to do the right thing or apply due diligence, because in a lot of cases that I cited in my written testimony, there are sort of public relations disasters that happened on the back end, and many of them could have been assessed or interpreted during the development process, but companies aren't incentivized to do that. So in some ways, transparency and explainability can give both legislators and the public more insight into these choices that companies are making to assess whether or not liability should be attached or different regulatory enforcement needs to be pursued.
Thank you. Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the testifiers. First, a yes or no question. Do we need more human supervision of algorithms on online platforms? Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, although I would put some footnotes.
Sure.
Yes, with footnotes.
So I want to follow up on what Dr. Wolfram said in terms of the unbreakability of these algorithms and the lack of transparency that is sort of built into what they are foundationally. And the reason I think that's an important point that you're making, which is that you need a human circuit breaker at some point to say, no, I choose not to be fed things by an algorithm. I choose to jump off of this platform. That's one aspect of humans acting as a circuit breaker. I'm a little more interested in the human employee, either at the line level or the human employee at the supervisory level, who takes some responsibility for how these algorithms evolve over time. And Ms. Richardson, I want you to maybe speak to that question, because it seems to me as policymakers, that's where the sweet spot is to find an incentive or a requirement where these companies will not allow these algorithms to run essentially unsupervised and not even understood by the highest echelons of the company except in their output. And so, Ms. Richardson, can you help me to flesh out what that would look like in terms of enabling human supervision?
So I think it's important to understand some of the points about the power asymmetry that Mr. Harris mentioned, because I definitely do think we need a human in the loop, but we also need to be cognizant of who actually has power in those dynamics, and that you don't necessarily want a frontline employee taking full liability for a decision that or for a system that they had no input in the design or even in their current sort of position in using it. So I think it needs to go all the way up in that if you're thinking about liability or responsibility in any form, it needs to attach at those who are actually making decisions about the goals, the designs, and ultimately the implementation and use of these technologies, and then figuring out what are the right pressure points or incentive dynamics to encourage companies or those making those decisions to make the right choice that benefits society.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that none of this ends up coming to much unless the executive level of these companies feel a legal and financial responsibility to supervise these algorithms. Ms. Stanfield, I was a little confused by one thing you said. Did you say Google doesn't use persuasive technology?
That is correct, sir.
Mr. Harris, is that true?
It's complicated. Persuasion is happening all throughout the ecosystem. In my mind, by the way, this is less about accusing one company, Google or Facebook. It's about understanding that every company...
Yeah, I get that, but she's here, and,
Yes.
and she just said that they don't use persuasive technology. And I'm trying to figure out, are you talking about just the Google suite of products? You're not talking about YouTube? Or are you saying in the whole alphabet pantheon of companies, you don't use persuasive technology? Because either I misunderstand your company or I misunderstand the definition of persuasive technology. Can you help me to understand what's going on here?
Sure. With respect to my response, Mr. Senator, it is related to the fact that dark patterns and persuasive technology is not core to how we design our products at Google, which are built around transparency.
Are you talking about
security, and control.
YouTube or the whole family of companies?
The whole family of companies, including YouTube.
You don't want to clarify that a little further?
We build our products with privacy, security, and control for the users. That is what we build for. And ultimately, this builds a lifelong relationship with the user, which is primary. That's our trust.
I don't know what any of that meant. Ms. Richardson, can you help me?
I think part of the challenge, as Mr. Harris mentioned, is how you're defining persuasive, and that both of us mentioned that a lot of these systems and internet platforms are a form of an optimization system, which is optimizing for certain goals, and there you could say that is a persuasive technology, which is not accounting for a certain social risk, but I think there's a business incentive to not, to take a more narrow view of that definition. So I can't speak for Google because I don't work for them, but I think the reason you're confused is because you may need to clarify definitions of what is actually persuasive in the way that you're asking the question and what is Google suggesting doesn't have persuasive characteristics in their technologies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schott. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Harris, as you know, I've introduced the Detour Act with Senator Warner to curb some of the manipulative user interfaces. We want to be able to increase transparency, especially when it comes to behavioral experimentation online. Obviously, we want to make sure children are not targeted with some of the dark patterns that are out there. In your perspective, how do dark patterns thwart that user autonomy online?
Yeah. So persuasion is so invisible and so subtle. In fact, oftentimes we're criticized when you use this language or you say we're crawling down the brainstem. People think that you're overreacting, but it's a design choice. So for background, I studied at a lab called the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford that taught engineering students essentially about this whole field. And my friends in the class were the founders of Instagram. And Instagram as a product copied Twitter actually in the technique of what you could call a dark pattern of the number of followers that you have to get people to follow each other. So there's a follow button on each profile. And that's meant, that doesn't seem so dark. That's what's so insidious about it. It's just you're giving people a way to follow each other's behavior. But what it actually is doing is an attempt to cause you to come back every day because now you want to see, do I have more followers now than I did yesterday?
And how are these platforms then getting our personal information? How much choice do we really have? I thought the doctor's comment about the goals we want to do as humans, that we have to get involved in this. But then your introductory comments are basically, I think, telling us that everything about us is already known. So It wouldn't be really hard to manipulate where our goals what they even want to be at this point, right?
And the goal is to subvert your goals. So I'll give you an example. If you say I want to delete my Facebook account, if you hit delete, it puts up a screen that says, are you sure you want to delete your Facebook account? The following friends will miss you, and it puts up faces of certain friends. Now, am I asking to know which friends will miss me? No. Does Facebook ask those friends, do I know, are they going to miss me if I leave? No. They're calculating which of the 5 faces would be most likely to get you to hit cancel and not delete your Facebook account. So that's a subtle and invisible dark pattern that's just meant to sway behavior. I think another example you're trying to get at in the opening question is if you consent to giving your data to Facebook or your location, and oftentimes there'll be a big blue button, which they've have 100 engineers behind the screen split testing all the different colors and variations and arrangements of where that button should be, and then a very, very, very small gray link that people don't even know is there. And so what we're calling a free human choice is a manipulated choice. And again, it's just like a magician. They're saying pick a card, any card, but in fact there's an asymmetry of power.
When you're on the internet and you're trying to look something up and you have this deal pop up on your screen, this is so irritating, and you have to hit OK to get out of it because you don't see the other choice on the screen. As you said, it's very light, it's gray, but now I know if I hit OK, this is going to go on, and whoever is going to get more and more information about me. They're really invading my privacy, but I can't get rid of this screen otherwise, unless you turn off your computer and start over. Right?
There's all sorts of ways to do this. If I'm a persuader and I really want you to hit OK on my dialogue so I can get your data, I'll wait until the day that you're in a rush to get the address to that place you're looking for, and that's the day that I'll put up the dialogue that says, hey, were you willing to get me your information? And then, of course, you're going to say, fine, yes, whatever, because in persuasion, there's something called hot states and cold states. When you're in a hot state or an immediate impulsive state, it's very easy to persuade someone than versus when they're in a cold, calm, and reflective state. And technology can actually either manufacture or wait till you're in those hot states.
So how do we protect ourselves and our privacy, and what role does the federal government have to play in this besides getting our bill passed?
At the end of the day, the reason why we go back to the business model is it is about alignment of interests. You don't want a system of asymmetric power that is designed to manipulate people, and you're always going to have that insofar as the business model is one of manipulation as opposed to regenerative, meaning you have a subscription-style relationship. So I would say Netflix probably has many fewer dark patterns because it's in a subscription relationship with its users. When Facebook says that, how else could we give people this free service? Well, it's like a priest whose entire business model is to manipulate people, saying, well, how else can I serve so many people?
Yeah.
Right. So
how do we keep our kids safe?
There's so much to that. I think what we need is a mass public awareness campaign so people understand what's going on. One thing I have learned is that if you tell people this is bad for you, they won't listen. If you tell people this is how you're being manipulated, no one wants to feel manipulated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you for being here today. I was struck by what Senator Schatz said in his opening statement. Algorithms are not only running wild, but they are running wild in secrecy. They are cloaked in secrecy in many respects from the people who are supposed to know about them. Ms. Richardson referred to the black box here. That black box is one of our greatest challenges today. And I think that we are at a time when algorithms, AI, and the exploding use of them is almost comparable to the time of the beginnings of atomic energy in this country. We now have an atomic energy commission. Nobody can build bombs, nuclear bombs, in their backyard because of the dangers of nuclear fission and fusion, which is comparable, I think, to what we have here, systems that are in many respects beyond our human control and affecting our lives in very direct, extraordinarily consequential terms beyond the control of the user and maybe the builder. So on the issue of persuasive technology, I find, Ms. Stanfill, your contention that Google does not build systems with the idea of persuasive technology in mind somewhat difficult to believe, because I think Google tries to keep people glued to its screens at the very least. That persuasive technology is operative. It's part of your business model. Keep the eyeballs. It may not be persuasive technology to convert them to the far left or the far right. Some of the content may do it, but at the very least, the technology is designed to promote usage. YouTube's recommendation system has a notorious history of pushing dangerous messages and content, promoting radicalization, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. Earlier this month, Senator Blackburn and I wrote to YouTube on reports that its recommendation system was promoting videos that sexualized children, effectively acting as a shepherd for pedophiles across its platform. Now, you say in your remarks that you've made changes to reduce the recommendation of content that, quote, violates our policies or spreads harmful misinformation. And according to your account, the number of views from recommendations for these videos has dropped by over 50% in the United States. I take those numbers as you've provided them. Can you tell me what specific steps you have taken to end your recommendation system's practice of promoting content that sexualizes children?
Thank you, Senator. We take our responsibility to supporting child safety online extremely seriously. Therefore, these changes are in effect, and as you stated, these have had a significant impact.
But what specifically?
Resulting in actually changing which content appears in the recommendations. So this is now classified as borderline content. That includes misinformation and child exploitation content.
You know, I am running out of time. I have so many questions, but I would like each of the witnesses to respond to the recommendations that Ms. Richardson has made, which I think are extraordinarily promising and important. I'm not going to have time to ask you about them here, but I would like the witnesses to respond in writing, if you would, please. And second, let me just observe on the topic of human supervision. I think that human supervision has to be also independent supervision. On the topic of arms control, we have a situation here where we need some kind of independent supervision, some kind of oversight, and yes, regulation. I know it's a dirty word these days in some circles, but protection will require intervention from some independent source here. I don't think trust me can work anymore. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses.
And we are going to wrap things up today with some local news this morning out of Logan. 12 people are in the hospital after a fire that left at least 2 of those victims in critical condition. Fox 29's Steve Keeley filed this report.
They throw one of the baby through the window and the neighbor catch that baby. It was just blazing. Pure fire, fire, fire.
4:30 a.m. fire call. It's still dark and still chaotic as Philly firefighters arrive to a dozen people, kids and adults, scattered all around this big 3-story corner house here at 12th and Ruscombe in Philadelphia's Logan section. Flames are shooting out the front. The injured people who jumped out the back or threw babies to neighbors running for their lives.
They found multiple building occupants out in the street, in the backyard, people with injuries, people who had jumped. Very chaotic scene when they arrived. Actually, one of our medic units grabbed some people and went to the hospital and then came back.
How high was the fire? How big were the flames?
Way up to the top, way up. It was coming up, way up to the top. It was way up to the 3rd floor, and it was going. This is their second fire. They had fire before, but this one is worse than the first time.
We're really hopeful that this is going to be a positive outcome, that those patients will pull through, and that there's nobody else in there. So that's really what we're thinking about right now.
The fire was put under control in 45 minutes, and then neighbors put it instantly under suspicion even faster, telling police and firefighters they saw a man running from the scene when the first flames erupted after tossing a Molotov cocktail on the porch. Dona, the Philadelphia arson-sniffing ATF-trained Yellow Lab K-9, also in on the case, helping arson investigators, soon trying to focus their attention on that front porch and working to see if they could confirm those neighbors' suspicions that someone, for some reason, intentionally set out to either harm, scare, or intimidate and could have killed many people and firefighters and little kids, too. In Logan, Steve Keeley, Fox 29 News.
And that is going to do it for us today at Fox 29's News Now. Be sure to catch us again tomorrow, same time, 10 a.m. And follow the latest breaking news at fox29.com as well as our mobile app. And across social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you for joining us.